Okay, so we understand the process in general. So we now need to be able to show this diagrammatically. Now, the point about neoclassical beliefs is they're not saying that the economy will always be at the Nehru or full employment or something. They're saying that it can move away from the Nehru in the short run, but will return in the long run. And therefore, when they come to analyse this, there is a difference in neoclassical economics between short-run aggregate supply and long-run aggregate supply. Long run will come to on the next video, but the short run, essentially the way neoclassical economists see things is that the macroeconomy has microeconomic underpinnings. So we know from earlier in the course that if we take an individual firm, then we know that for a firm, supply slopes upward in that way, higher price, more supply. And we said the reason is that that's based on marginal cost. So firms will only supply stuff that is made, they'll only supply, if price is 10 quid, they'll only supply the units for which price is above marginal cost, because it doesn't make any sense otherwise. If we look at the industry, so if that's firm 1, and then we have a similar firm 2, so there's supply equals marginal cost for firm 2. Price is 10 quid, they're supplying 100. Let's suppose at price of 10 quid, they're supplying 110. Then the industry supply, of course, at a price of £10. If we say there are 2 firms in the industry supply is 100 from firm 1 plus 110 from firm 2. Industry supply is 210. At a price of 20 quid, firm 1 supplies 150, firm 2 supplies, say, 160. Therefore, at a price of £20, industry supply is 310. So all we can say is that industry supply curve, supply industry, is made up of the marginal cost curves. It's made up of the supply curves of the individual firms. It's made up of the individual supply curves. We can say that is the sum of marginal cost. And that's for the industry. And the economy as a whole, of course, is made up of all of the industries that are in it. So what we can say is that if we want to know what does the supply curve for the economy as a whole look like in the short run, and remember, in the short run, there's at least one fixed factor of production. That's its definition. That's why the marginal cost curve for the firm slopes upwards. We talked about the principle of diminishing returns, back much earlier on. What we're saying now is that if this is now the economy as a whole, that's real GDP, and that's the price level, we can say that there is a short-run aggregate supply function, that's simply based on the marginal cost curves of the individual firms in the economy. So that short-run aggregate supply function is based on marginal cost of all firms. So it has microeconomic underpinnings. And what we're saying is that because it's the short run, because there are firms are facing capacity constraints and there's diminishing returns, attempts to increase output will mean that firms will only be willing to supply if there are higher prices, so that they can cover those costs. So what's determining the position of the short run aggregate supply curve is underlying costs. So what might cause that line to shift is a change in costs. So if there is some sort of an oil shock, or the government increases VAT or increases the national minimum wage, then for a given output level, firms will only supply if the price is higher. Or at a given price, because firms' costs are higher, they won't be willing to supply as much. So therefore, what we're saying is that our short-run aggregate supply function will shift vertically if there is an increase in costs, meaning that at a given price, firms will be willing to supply less, or for a given level of GDP, a higher price will be required from firms to supply that level of output. So that could be something like oil prices, it could be something like an increase in VAT, it could be something like an increase in the national minimum wage, any of those things, which are increasing the level of costs in the economy, could lead to a vertical shift in short-run aggregate supply. Likewise, If there was a decrease in those costs, then that's making it easier for firms to supply, and therefore across the economy as a whole, firms are going to be willing to expand output. So, SRAS, if that's 012, SRSA2, that's caused by a decrease in costs in some sense. Again, things like oil prices, component costs, raw materials, any of those sorts of things that are going to have an impact across the economy as a whole. So now we've established this idea of the short run aggregate supply, what we can show is how, in the short run, neoclassical economists believe that a shock will take the economy away from the narrow, but that in the long run, it's going to return there. And it's just the same process as the one that we mapped out as a flow diagram earlier, but we can then show it using diagrams as well.